Hi everyone, and welcome to today's talk on how to provide value from the very first day of your dev career. My name is Thuy. I'm mostly a front-end developer, and I've been a developer since 2016. That was the year that I left advertising and transitioned into tech after taking a 10-week full-time bootcamp. Since then, I've been working in edtech for around 4 years, and I've developed many passions, including React, accessibility, DEI, and one of which is related to this talk, is building early career confidence for developers who were once in my shoes. Today, I want to talk about 5 areas for you to provide value, starting with the earliest, which is onboarding on day 1 of your job. Other opportunities include documentation, product quality, team culture and alignment, and last but not least, peer development, which includes helping and growing developers who have more experience than you. Let's get right into it. Onboarding. Here's a tweet that I think describes onboarding well, at least according to the way that I've experienced it. It says, when you start a new software development job, you have to set up your dev environment before you can do work. This is always painful because the process evolves over time and nobody remembers how they did it. If you put this a different way, this means that when you onboard, you're more likely than not going to run into problems. When that does happen, instead of trying to hurry through it like a speed run so you can get to coding a feature as fast as possible, take the time to improve the process for the people that come after you by noting all barriers to success, even the trivial ones. Here are some examples based on some common dev environment setup hurdles that I've experienced. 1, you're going to go through the README. You're going to run into commands that you have to run, like npm install, curling something, setting up a DB, or whatever. When you run into those errors, obviously, if you are having a hard time, ask somebody in Slack for help. But even if you figure it out on your own, or you get help and keep moving along through it, take the time to think maybe or consider putting it into Slack as a heads up. So what you can say is, heads up everyone, when I ran XYZ in the README of this repo, I ran into this error. If this helps anyone, I just wanted to leave this here. And that helps whoever sets up this repo later on. 2 and 3 are closely related. They're related to common broken things in READMEs that I've seen. And 1 is broken hyperlinks. The second being broken navs. And by that I mean table of contents where it has heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it tells you to click this so that it goes to a certain heading, but those are broken. When you encounter those, either put up a tiny PR right away or, table it, write it down so that you can put up a PR later. And even if you don't run into them, you could think about proactively going through the entire README for the thing that you're trying to set up, or going through a different README to find those things. Next one, documentation. Here's a tweet that I really related to with my early career experience. It says, I truly thought something was wrong with me when I was studying AWS. Turns out the docs just sucked. Instead of thinking, like when you're reading docs, instead of thinking that there's something wrong with you or the way that you think, more often than not, the docs could actually be written much better. If there is a part that you don't understand, lean into that feeling instead of out. The thing that I've learned over the last 4 years that I've been a developer at my company is that everyone wants the documentation to be good, even the person that wrote that documentation. If you come up with a better way to describe something in the docs, or somebody explains something to you in a one-on-one meeting that makes the documentation much more clear to you, add that clarity to the docs so that it helps the next person that comes along. Or it helps you when you come back 3 months later to read the same thing. Another thing you could do to improve documentation is to draw diagrams. For example, let's say you're looking at a diagram for your company's front-end architecture for the first time. For the person who wrote that doc, it's easier for them to possibly gloss over things when they're familiar with the system, because things that feel obvious to them but are in fact not obvious may not have been written down. So this is the best time for you to use your fresh eyes to improve those diagrams. For example, maybe the flow of information in those diagrams wasn't clear somewhere. Add a note. That note will help the next developer. And at minimum, it will help you the next time you come to read that thing 3 months later. Product quality. So even before you start developing a feature, you actually have the chance to influence product quality in the form of acceptance criteria. What is acceptance criteria? Another term that you might hear for this sort of thing is called the definition of done. What having both of these does is signal to us developers when a feature is complete and ready to move on to the next step. Okay. If there are no acceptance criteria or has not been a definition of done established for your team, ask the team to create it. If it does exist, try and see if it would be worth clarifying the acceptance criteria for a certain task. An example would be, let's say there's a task to make a new onboarding flow for an application that your company has. But let's say that it's not clear which browsers you have to test that new onboarding flow on. Get that clarity and note it in the task on Jira or on Trello or whatever application that your company uses so that it's clear for whoever picks it up later on. If you do this up front, the team will spend less time going back to fix the things that were ultimately missing. Another opportunity to provide value in the area of improving product quality is by asking questions in PRs. I've seen people who have felt bad for asking questions in a PR. And I think it's totally reasonable to feel more comfortable reviewing a PR if you have the context on that feature. But that doesn't mean that you can't provide value if you don't have the context. So if you don't get something, just ask the question anyway and make a suggestion to improve that part of the code after you understand what it does. For example, if what a function is doing isn't clear to you, it's possible that's a sign that the function is named poorly. That's one thing. Or maybe the variables inside the function are named poorly. Suggest a better name. Next, team culture and alignment. First thing that you can do when you join a new team, whether you're transitioning from one team to the next or you just joined a team at a company, is getting everyone aligned on team expectations if they aren't already. So before starting an activity, you can ask the team leads if there's an existing team manifesto or agreement somewhere. If so, you can read up on it. But if not, suggest that the team do an activity to determine two things. One, team values. An example being the team values accessibility, and the whole team from beginning to end will commit to building an accessible product. The second thing that this activity would serve to do is by coming to an agreed upon way that everyone thinks that you should work. For example, let's say you're in the office and you all agree that if somebody has headphones in, you don't tap them on the shoulder and interrupt them, you select them. Another thing that I see commonly at my company is people will agree that there will be no team meetings on certain days of the week, like Tuesday or Thursday. Second opportunity to improve team culture and alignment is by asking clarifying questions in meetings. Sometimes you're going to be in meetings where the purpose of it is not clear. And that means that there's a high chance that the entire team's time is being wasted and not used effectively. Ask questions so that the outcome of the meeting is clear. You can say, what is the purpose of this meeting? What is the goal? What do we want to leave this meeting with? And if let's say the team is talking about multiple things, that suggests that the team should maybe table unrelated topics so that the team can narrow the focus of the meeting and get back on track. Third way to improve team culture and alignment is by improving meetings in a different way. For example, you might find yourself, you go to meetings and you find that very important people aren't there. You can help the team determine who's necessary to go to certain meetings and who doesn't, who's optional. Another thing that you can do is help the team be clear on what things need to be done before a meeting occurs. So you can look at a meeting like a function that takes inputs and spits out an output. And if, backlog grooming needs XYZ thing done or XYZ inputs done, make sure that backlog grooming is scheduled in your sprint duration when those inputs are complete. Basically, suggest an alternative schedule. You can also do other things like proactively cut meetings if they can be resolved asynchronously, because Zoom fatigue is real. Peer development. This is the last one. And the two opportunities to provide value here, I will say, are the most daunting to the average person. They are volunteering to be the driver in a pair programming session or advising another team. Another one is to give presentations in front of the company or parts of the company. Now, because you're new, you might think, how could I pair program and drive effectively with someone if I barely know anything about what we're working on? I get it. But the thing is, as you go on, you will understand more and more things. And even if that's only, one area of your domain, you can look out for opportunities to share that knowledge. For example, someone onboards after you, that's whether they're, less experienced than you or not, you can volunteer to explain those one or two parts of the system to them. Same goes for if another team starts working in your code base or in your domain. Offer to explain those one or two parts that you do know. Similarly, as your squad does work, your squad might do experiments or build things that don't go so great and you learn from it. What you can do is you can offer to present your team's experience to the company. Or, if that's really scary for you, because I know a lot of people don't like public speaking or presenting, what you can do is offer to demo the latest shiny feature to your stakeholder. Like, let's say you work on an internal tool that some users in another part of the company use. You can offer to demo that in a little 2-minute demo. That way, you're still presenting, but to a smaller audience than the whole company. In summary, there were 5 opportunities we talked about today for you to provide impact from the very first day you step foot into the company. They were onboarding, documentation, product quality, team culture and alignment, and peer development. Now that we're at the end here, you'll have probably noticed that all the ways that I gave to provide value early on in your career were in fact mostly not related to coding. And that is because over the last 4 or 5 years that I've been a developer, I've realized that the job of a developer is actually more socio-technical than it is purely technical. Okay? And as you progress as a developer, those more intangible people, process, socio parts of your job are going to become more and more important. whether or not you stay an individual contributor that codes or you become a manager. The earlier that you know this, the earlier you can provide value in all the ways that you are capable of doing. And I know that you're capable of doing it. That brings us to the end, everyone. If you have any questions about, how to provide value from day one of your dev career or anything else that I covered today, feel free to leave a comment on my CodeLand post on Code Newbie community. You can also follow me everywhere, including Code Newbie at Clearly Tweeto. I look forward to connecting with you all. I love to chat. So especially if you're an early career dev that feels intimidated by the future, reach out. Especially on Twitter, I'm super active. And I hope you all have a great time at CodeLand. Thank you. Bye-bye.